everybody. I am going to go through chapter 6, English Orthography, from our book Essential Linguistics. And so English orthography refers to spelling, punctuation, spacing, and special features like bold and italics. But this chapter specifically focuses on the ways letters are used to spell words. And so there are two views of spelling development. The first one is the learning view, which is where you give students a word list. They write down those words several times. They may use it in a sentence, in a paragraph, and then you give them a test. And this is what is predominant in American schools. But then there's the acquisition view, which is where this chapter favors. In the acquisition view, there's activities to focus on words. Teachers and students are discussing spellings. They're actually going through linguistic investigations to discover spelling patterns. The chapter also mentions graphotactic knowledge, which refers to knowledge of combination of letters. This is the knowledge that you use to unscramble puzzles. And teachers with an acquisition view will give students word games. We'll give them books about words and strategies and resources for them, and they say no to memorization. Now, most people agree that English spelling is complex because there's this widespread belief that English spelling is not logical, it's not consistent, it's not predictable. So it's important to understand all the writing systems, right? So the development of the writing systems. So there's syllabaries, which are characters that represent syllables. These are found in Japanese, the Cherokee, and there's the alphabetic. Each letter in a word represents a sound. These are found in many writing systems like English. And so what you'll see next is a little bit of a historical overview of early writing systems. And they were created for trading, political, and economic purposes. And first we start off with pictographic, or pictures or symbols representing ideas, like the cuneiform, which had marks as symbols, and then the hieroglyphics, which had marks and pictures. Yes. And modern English was developed over time. So examining all these changes do help us understand our current spelling system. And so we'll start with Old English. The period dates for this was 450 to 1100. And this was based on the Roman alphabet, except that there were some letters that were not used, right? Like J, K, V, or W, Q, and C were a little bit more rare, and some sounds were spelled differently. Then we moved on to Middle English. The period dates for this were 1100 to 1500. And here French and Latin were added, so there was these changes in the spelling. So for example, the U replaced the OU for more of a French spelling. And then finally the modern English, period dates 1500 to the present. And at this point there was a call for consistency in spelling. There were changes. Now there were changes for Greek and Latin, right? They're starting to be infused, and changes in the spellings. For example, the B added in that because of Latin spelling. Here's a Latin word. And at this point, a book was published. The dictionary was published, Dictionary of the English Language, which fixed spellings. There were changes in pronunciation after the spellings were changed, and at this time we had the great vowel shift. This is where vowels were pronounced at a higher point, like feet. The American Spelling Book was also published, and this one set a standard for American spelling, and this is by Noah Webster. And again, this historical overview really just told us spelling didn't always match the sounds, and it explains why, right? So there's a lot of spelling reforms, and through these spelling reforms, it suggests that the writing system it serves the readers, it serves the writers, but it favors the writers, and it's just not beneficial for all groups, which is why there's a pushback. So some of the spelling reforms that we have, The first one is the phonetic demand, which is to spell words the way that they sound. Most words are already spelled the way that they sound, except there's exceptions, right? Like homophones, like great and great, they mean different things. The second spelling reform we have is a semantic demand, spelling words alike that share the same meaning. So some spellings do spell words alike, like bomb and bombard. And the third and final spelling reform is the etymological demand, spelling words to reflect their origins. Right, so we already have some spellings that do signal origins of the word, like psychology, is Latin based, and the chapter also starts talking about spelling investigations within the classroom and how all of these word histories are very important because they help students make sense of the actual words. It also helps them become better spellers because they're having them investigate these spellings and taking a scientific approach, problem solving approach to spelling. I'll give you some examples. So some of those class activities is where you have students collect words, and after they collect words, they start categorizing the words by looking for patterns. And after they categorize them, they start making generalizations about the spellings. Why were they spelled that way, right? And of course, there are going to be more examples through time, and they'll start finding exceptions as well. And so this is an example of them collecting the words and categorizing them. Other class activities are spelling of the K, right? So here they brainstorm all the ways that K can be spelled. And in small groups, they look through text and they're looking for these words. Here's an example of what they would find. And of course, they start looking also for less common spellings. And this is where they start looking up histories as to why is it different? Why is that word spelled differently? Another one is really the same thing, right? Investigating the history. So here they're not being asked to memorize words, instead they're being asked to investigate them. Okay. Something that was really interesting to me was when they brought up investigating spelling across languages, and one of the benefits that they gave for this was to improve spelling in not just one but in both languages. And they pointed out English and Spanish, right? These languages, they can see the parallels, they can see the patterns as well. And they take on the scientific approach, right? It's better than a spelling list and brings awareness of English spelling systems by examining those patterns and even those rules. And so students who approach this as a logical system, they do better at spelling than those that memorize. And so there really was this emphasis not to have students memorize word spelling. As far as spelling rules go, right, memorizing a formula is not enough because they may know the formula, but they have difficulty applying it. And so they need to be able to internalize that rule by visualizing it and then collecting words that match it, and then start making generalizations about spelling, trying to figure out why they see these patterns. And in conclusion of this chapter, right, they push for students to begin to approach the study of language the way that linguists do, right? By studying those words, studying the spellings. And so I selected this article, what spelling tells us about the orthographic development and word study instruction with emergent bilingual secondary students, based on that section that I found really interested. I became very interested in that, and that's how I made that connection. And so this article just focused on word study as a way to improve reading and writing for emergent bilinguals. And emergent bilinguals may use the sound system in one language to spell in another, right? We know that. And so this study examined the spelling of bilinguals, focused predominantly on English and Spanish bilinguals at the secondary level. And so they had 127 middle school and 72 high school students participate in the study. the way that they spelled words were examined for the influence of their students' home language, primarily is primarily Spanish, and they also stressed knowing students' spelling development as a teacher is really important because it serves as a formative assessment, and it also serves as a way of guiding instruction. Okay, and the article, or really the study, came to the conclusion that spelling and vocabulary knowledge and instruction is related to academic achievement, and students will benefit from interventions that support disciplinary studies, literacy instruction to teach word study at the alphabetic, the pattern, and the meaning layers. And of course, to be able to do this, they do need extensive support, which does not involve just memorizing words for their spelling. And so they did list the potential in word study when it comes to phonics, spelling, and vocabulary for secondary students. And really to develop that word consciousness that the chapter also discussed, because it impacts their reading comprehension and their understanding. Right, so really they would benefit from that scientific problem solving approach. And these are my references. First one is the book, second one is my article. And so thank you very much for joining me and going through the chapter and the article. Thank you.